Grand Admiral Vorth stood at the center of the war room. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his yellow eyes watched the massive display screen before him. The screen showed nothing. Empty space. Static. This was wrong. This was very wrong. 3 weeks ago, he had sent the third conquest fleet to a small blue planet called Earth. 700 warships, 3 million soldiers, the finest warriors of the Draconian hegemony. Their mission was simple: find the humans, crush them, add their world to the empire. It should have taken hours, maybe a day at most. The Draconians had done this 42 times before. 42 species had fallen before their might. Some had advanced technology, some had powerful weapons, some had armies of billions. None of it mattered. The Draconians always won. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, the ultimate hunters. No species could stand against them. But now there was silence. Vorth turned to his communications officer. The young Draconian's scales had gone pale with fear. "Still nothing?" Vorth asked. His voice was calm, but his claws dug into the metal railing before him. "Nothing, Grand Admiral. No signals. No transmissions. No distress calls. The fleet is simply gone. Gone." The word hung in the air like poison. Fleets did not simply disappear. Ships were destroyed in battle, yes. They sent distress signals. They left wreckage. Escape pods launched. Survivors screamed for help on emergency channels. That was how war worked. That was how death worked. But there was nothing. Not a whisper. Not a fragment. Vorth had fought in 17 wars. He had watched planets burn. He had seen species beg for mercy before they were erased from history. He understood violence. He understood defeat. But this was something else entirely. This was a mystery, and mysteries made him uncomfortable. "Send scout probes," he ordered. "I want eyes on the Sol system within the hour." The probes launched. Small, fast, designed for stealth. They jumped through hyperspace toward Earth. Vorath waited. The war room fell silent. Officers stood at their stations, afraid to speak, afraid to breathe too loudly. The first probe reached the Sol system. It sent back data for exactly 4 seconds. Then it went dark. The second probe lasted 3 seconds. The third probe never even transmitted. Vorath felt something cold crawl up his spine. It was not fear. Draconians did not feel fear, but it was close, very close. "What is happening?" one of his officers whispered. Vorth did not answer. He did not know, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. The High Council was summoned. 12 of the most powerful Draconians in the galaxy gathered in the great chamber beneath the capital city. They sat in a circle, their ancient bodies covered in scars from centuries of conquest. These were beings who had crushed civilizations. They had never known defeat. Now they sat in confused silence. "Perhaps the fleet encountered a black hole," one council member suggested. "A natural disaster of some kind." 700 ships do not fly into a black hole," another snapped. "And a black hole would leave gravitational evidence. There is nothing, absolutely nothing." "Then what? What could destroy an entire fleet without leaving a trace?" No one had an answer. Vorth stepped forward. He was not a member of the council, but they had called him here. He was their greatest military mind, and they needed answers. "The humans," he said slowly. "What do we know about them?" An intelligence officer activated a display. Images appeared. Small creatures, soft skin, no claws, no scales, no natural armor. They walked on 2 legs and had no tails. Their teeth were blunt. Their bodies were fragile. "They are weak," the officer said. "They live short lives, 80 years at most. They have basic space travel. Their weapons are primitive compared to ours. Their planet has constant warfare between different groups of their own species. They cannot even unite among themselves." "And yet," Voreth said quietly, 700 of our ships are gone." The council shifted uncomfortably. "It must be a trick," the eldest council member declared. "Some kind of weapon we have not seen before. A bomb that leaves no trace. We will send more ships, more soldiers. We will overwhelm them with numbers." Vorath shook his head slowly. "We need information first. We need to understand what happened. If we send another fleet blindly, we may lose them too." The council argued for hours. Some wanted immediate attack. Others wanted caution. Finally, they reached a decision. A single stealth ship would be sent to investigate. It would observe the humans from a distance. It would find out what happened to the fleet, and then, only then, would they decide how to respond. The mission was given to Intelligence Officer Silas. She was young by Draconian standards, barely 200 years old, but she was brilliant, cold, analytical. She had solved impossible puzzles before. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was her. Voreth met with her before she departed. They stood in the hangar bay, looking at her ship, the Whisper of Certainty. It was small and black, designed to be invisible to sensors. Find out what happened, Voreth told her. Find out how they did it, and if possible, find survivors. Silas tilted her head. You believe there are survivors, Grand Admiral? No, Voreth admitted. But I need to know for certain. I need to understand this enemy. Because right now, I do not understand them at all. And that, he paused, his yellow eyes distant. That has never happened before. Silas nodded. She understood. The Draconians had always known their enemies. They had always been stronger, smarter, more advanced. They had always won because victory was inevitable. It was the natural order of things. But now something had changed. Something had broken that natural order. As Silas boarded her ship and prepared for launch, she felt a strange sensation in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. She had read about this feeling in old texts, in stories from ancient times before the Draconians became the masters of the galaxy. It was doubt. The whisper of certainty launched into the darkness of space. Behind her, the Draconian homeworld grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another dot of light among billions. Ahead of her lay Earth, a small blue planet, home to a weak, fragile, short-lived species, a species that had made 700 warships disappear without a trace. Silas activated her navigation systems and set course for the Sol system. The journey would take 6 days. 6 days to prepare herself for whatever she would find. She had solved many mysteries in her career. She had uncovered secrets that others thought impossible to find. But as she flew through the empty void between stars, she felt something she had never felt before. She was afraid of what she might discover. The whisper of certainty dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Silas sat in her command chair, her claws gripping the armrest tightly. Her 2 crew members, both trained intelligence operatives, worked silently at their stations. Begin scanning, Silas ordered. I want to see everything. The ship's sensors reached out across the darkness. They searched for debris. They searched for radiation. They searched for the chemical signatures of Draconian blood and metal. They searched for any sign that a battle had taken place here. They found nothing. Silas leaned forward. Expand the search. Check the entire system. Her crew obeyed. The sensors swept past the outer planets. They scanned the asteroid belt. They examined every corner of space where a fleet could have fought and died. Nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no broken ships floating in the void. It was as if the Third Conquest Fleet had never existed. This is impossible, one of her crew members whispered. 700 ships cannot simply vanish. Silas did not respond. She was staring at the display screen, where a small blue and green planet hung in the darkness. Earth, the human homeworld. Take us closer, she said. Maintain stealth protocols. I want to see this planet for myself. The ship moved slowly, carefully, using minimal power to avoid detection. As they approached, Silas watched the sensors paint a picture of the world below. Earth was alive, very alive. Billions of life signs covered the surface. Cities glowed with light. Ships moved in and out of orbital stations. Satellites circled the planet in complex patterns. Radio signals filled the space around the world, carrying voices and music and data. There was no sign of war, no devastation, no grief. Silas felt her scales grow cold. This made no sense. Just 3 weeks ago, 700 Draconian warships had arrived here, with weapons blazing. They had come to conquer and enslave. They had come with enough firepower to crack continents. And the humans were just living their lives, going about their day as if nothing had happened. Intercept their communications, Silas ordered. I want to hear what they are saying. Her crew worked quickly. Soon, human voices filled the ship. Silas listened carefully. The Draconian translation systems were excellent, and she understood every word. A woman talked about the weather. A man discussed a game where humans kicked a ball across a field. Children laughed and played. News programs reported on political arguments and celebrity gossip and business deals. Scientists discussed their research. Artists talked about their creations. Not one word about an alien invasion. Not one mention of the Draconian fleet. Not one whisper about a battle for survival. Perhaps they are hiding it, one of her crew suggested. Perhaps their government is keeping it secret. Silas shook her head. You cannot hide something this big. We attacked with 700 ships. Millions of humans would have seen them in the sky. There would be fear, panic, something. She listened to more communications. Hours passed. She heard thousands of different humans talking about thousands of different things. None of them mentioned the attack. It was as if it had never happened. Silas sat back in her chair and tried to think. She was a logical creature. She believed in evidence and reason. There had to be an explanation. There was always an explanation. Then her sensors detected something strange. At the very edge of the system, far from Earth, there was a single life sign. A Draconian life sign. Faint, weak, but definitely real. Set course, Silas said immediately. Maximum stealth. I want to reach that signal before it disappears. The ship turned and flew toward the outer darkness. The journey took several hours. As they traveled, Silas studied the life sign on her display. It was coming from a small object drifting through space, an escape pod. Draconian design. Someone had survived. They found the pod tumbling slowly through the void. Its power was almost gone. The hull was damaged but intact, and inside, barely alive, was a Draconian soldier. Silas brought the pod into her ship's small cargo bay. She put on a protective suit and went to examine the survivor. When she opened the pod, she found a sight that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The soldier inside was Captain Driven. She recognized him from military records. He had been a rising star in the fleet, a warrior with dozens of victories. He was only 150 years old, young and strong and proud. But the creature in the pod did not look young or strong. His scales had turned gray. His eyes were empty and staring. His body twitched and shook. He looked like he had aged 50 years in 3 weeks. And he was talking to himself, the same words over and over again. They decided. They just decided. And we were gone. They decided. They just decided. Silas knelt beside him. Captain Drevin, can you hear me? I am Intelligence Officer Silas. I am here to help you. Drevin's eyes moved slowly toward her. For a long moment he just stared, as if he did not quite believe she was real. Then he grabbed her arm with a grip of desperate strength. You have to go, he whispered. You have to leave. They will know you are here. They will decide about you too. They will make you disappear like the others. Who? Silas asked. Who will decide? What happened to the fleet? Draven laughed. It was not a healthy sound. It was the laugh of a mind that had broken under pressure too great to bear. The humans, he said. The weak little humans. They did not fight us. They did not need weapons. They just decided. All of them. Together. They decided we were not there. And then we were not. Silas did not understand. What do you mean? How can someone decide that a ship does not exist? Drevin shook his head violently. You do not understand. I did not understand either. But I saw it happen. I saw our ships go dark. I saw the power die. And then I saw them start to disappear, one by one. No explosion, no damage. They just stopped being real. Like they were never there at all. He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. There was no battle, Officer Silas. There was no war. The humans just looked at us, all of them together, and they decided we did not exist. And the universe agreed with them. Silas felt her scales grow cold. This was madness. This was impossible. This was against every law of physics she had ever learned. But Captain Drevin was here. He was the only survivor of 700 ships. and his pod had been found at the very edge of the system, as far from Earth as possible. He had run. He had fled at maximum speed while his entire fleet disappeared around him. And even then, even at this great distance, he looked like he was dying. "What is happening to you?" Silas asked quietly. "Why do you look so old?" Dravan looked at his own hands. His scales were falling off. His claws were brittle and cracked. "I am being forgotten," he said. "Slowly. The humans did not decide about me as hard as the others. I was too far away. But I was still there. I still saw. And now I am fading. Every day I feel less real. Every day I lose more of myself." He looked up at her with eyes full of ancient terror. "They did not just destroy our fleet, Officer Silas. They erased it. They made it so that it never existed at all. And now the universe is trying to erase me too, because I remember what they did." Silas stood slowly. Her logical mind was screaming that this was impossible. But her instincts, the deep survival instincts of a predator, were telling her something else. They were telling her to run. She looked out the window at the distant blue dot of Earth. 8 billion humans lived on that tiny world. 8 billion minds. 8 billion witnesses to reality. What had they created? What had they become? And more importantly, what would they do if they discovered that Silas was here, watching them, trying to understand their secret? She had come here for answers. Now she had more questions than ever before, and a terrible feeling that knowing the truth might be the most dangerous thing in the universe. Silas moved Captain Draven to the medical bay of her ship. She gave him food, water, and medicine. She monitored his vital signs, but nothing she did could stop the slow decay that was consuming him. Every hour he looked a little older. Every hour he seemed a little less solid, as if the light was passing through him more easily than before. It was subtle, but it was real. Her crew was terrified. They wanted to leave immediately, to return home and report what they had found. But Silas refused. She needed more information. She needed to understand what had happened, truly understand it, before she could face the High Council. So she sat with Draven, hour after hour, and listened to his story. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning. Tell me exactly what happened when the fleet arrived." Draven's eyes were distant, seeing things that were no longer there. But he spoke, and his voice was surprisingly steady. "We arrived in perfect formation, 700 ships. The planet was beautiful, I remember that. Blue and green and white with clouds. We had seen hundreds of worlds, but there was something special about this one. It looked so alive." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Fleet Admiral Caro sent the standard message: "Surrender or be destroyed." We had said those words to 42 species before. Most surrendered immediately. Some fought and died. Either way, the outcome was never in doubt. "But the humans did not surrender," Silas said. "No." Draven shook his head slowly. "They did not surrender. Instead, they sent back a single message. Just one sentence in perfect Draconian language. No translation errors, no accent, as if they had always known our tongue." "What did they say?" Draven looked at her. His eyes were full of something she had never seen in a Draconian before. Pure, absolute fear. "They said, you were warned. You came anyway." Silas felt a chill run through her body. "Warned? When were we warned?" "I do not know. I never heard of any warning. But they seemed certain. They seemed disappointed. Not afraid, not angry, just sad and disappointed, like a parent watching a child make a terrible mistake." He took a shaky breath and continued. "Then everything went dark, not slowly, not piece by piece, all at once. Every ship, every system, every light. It was like someone had reached inside our vessels and turned off the universe." Silas leaned forward. "An electromagnetic pulse? Some kind of weapon?" "No. That was what I thought at first. But this was different. Our backup systems did not activate. Our emergency power did not engage. Because there was nothing wrong with our technology. Our ships were fine. They just stopped working, stopped being machines. It was like they forgot what they were supposed to do." He rubbed his face with trembling claws. We floated there in the darkness. Millions of us. No gravity, no air recycling, no heat. The cold started creeping in immediately. Some of the soldiers panicked. Others prayed to the old gods. But most of us just waited, trying to understand what had happened. How long did this last? I do not know. Time became strange. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. But then I saw something through the window of my escape pod. Something I will never forget. His voice dropped to a whisper. The ships started to disappear. Not explode, not break apart. They just faded, like shadows in sunlight. I watched a battle cruiser vanish right in front of my eyes. One moment it was there, solid and real. The next moment, there was nothing. No flash, no sound, no debris, just empty space where a ship used to be. Silas tried to process this. Her mind searched for logical explanations. Cloaking technology, teleportation, some kind of advanced weapon that disintegrated matter completely. But even as she thought of these possibilities, she knew they were wrong. The physics did not work. Nothing could make a ship simply cease to exist. "How did you escape?" she asked. My escape pod had already launched. When the darkness came, I was thrown against a wall. The impact triggered the emergency release. The pod shot out into space, away from the fleet, moving at maximum speed. He looked at his hands again. More scales had fallen off during their conversation. "I think that is why I am still here. I was far enough away, moving fast enough. The humans did not decide about me as strongly as the others. But I was still there. I still witnessed what they did. And now the universe is slowly correcting that mistake." "I do not understand," Silas said. "How can humans decide that something does not exist? They are just organic creatures. They have no special powers." Drevin laughed bitterly. "That is what we thought too. But we were wrong. We were so very wrong." He grabbed her arm again, pulling her close. "I felt it, Silas. In those final moments before my pod escaped, I felt their minds. Not individually, but together. Like a single vast consciousness, made of billions of smaller parts. They were all thinking the same thing at the same time. All 8 billion of them. And what they were thinking was, these ships do not exist. These invaders are not real." This attack never happened. His grip tightened. And when 8 billion minds believe something with absolute certainty, when they all focus on the same thought at the same moment, reality listens. Reality obeys. Because what is reality except what observers believe it to be? Silas pulled away from him. Her scientific mind was rejecting everything he said. It was impossible. It was madness. But she could not deny what she had seen with her own eyes. Earth was untouched. The fleet was gone. And Captain Drevin was slowly fading from existence, becoming less real with every passing moment. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would the universe care what humans think?" Drevin closed his eyes. "I do not know. Maybe they evolved differently than us. Maybe their consciousness works on a level we cannot understand. Or maybe all conscious beings have this power, and humans are simply the first to discover how to use it." He opened his eyes and looked at her with terrible intensity. "Think about it. They spent their entire history fighting each other, arguing, disagreeing. Every human seemed to believe something different from every other human. We thought this made them weak. But what if it was training? What if all those centuries of conflict were teaching them how to focus, how to unite, how to believe in something so completely that it becomes real?" Silas stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Draconian hegemony waited for her report. They would want answers. They would want a plan for victory. But how do you fight an enemy that can simply decide you do not exist? She turned back to Drevin. He was growing fainter, she realized. She could almost see the wall behind him through his body. "Thank you for your testimony, Captain. Your sacrifice will be remembered." Drevin smiled sadly. "Will it? Will any of this be remembered? Or will the humans eventually decide that the entire Draconian species never existed? That our homeworld never was? That our entire history was just a dream that nobody dreamed?" Silas had no answer. Drevin closed his eyes. I can feel myself disappearing. It is not painful. It is just quiet, like falling asleep and knowing you will never wake up, like becoming a memory that nobody remembers. He looked at her one final time. Run, Officer Silas. Run back to our people. Tell them what you learned here, and pray that the humans never decide to look our way again. Because if they do, if they focus their minds on the Draconian hegemony, he took a shaky breath, there will be no signals, no wreckage, no proof we ever existed at all. By morning, Captain Drevin was gone. Not dead, just gone. His body had faded completely during the night. Even the blankets that had covered him lay flat on the empty bed. Silas stared at the spot where he had been, the last survivor of 700 ships, the last witness to humanity's terrible power. She gave the order to return home. The whisper of certainty turned away from Earth and jumped into hyperspace. Behind them, the blue planet continued to spin peacefully through the void. 8 billion humans went about their lives, completely unaware that they had just won the greatest victory in the history of warfare. Or perhaps they were aware. Perhaps they knew exactly what they had done, and perhaps that was the most terrifying thought of all. Silas did not return home immediately. She could not. The testimony of Captain Drevin had given her answers, but those answers raised even more questions, and she knew that the High Council would not believe her without proof. They would call her mad. They would dismiss her report as fantasy. She needed to understand the humans better. She needed evidence. So instead of flying directly back to the Draconian homeworld, she took her ship to the edges of human space. She hid among the asteroids and debris of distant systems, and she watched. She listened. She gathered every piece of information she could find. Her crew thought she was crazy. They begged her to leave, but Silas was driven by something stronger than fear. She needed to know the truth. For weeks, she intercepted human communications. She studied their history. She analyzed their technology. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to understand. The humans called it the Unity. It had begun 60 years ago, a simple experiment in connecting human minds through technology. At first, it was limited, a few hundred volunteers linking their thoughts through complex machines. Scientists studying how consciousness worked when it was shared. But then something strange happened. The connected humans began to notice things that individual humans could not. They could sense patterns in reality itself. They could feel the way the universe responded to observation. And they discovered something that changed everything. Reality was not fixed, it was flexible. It bent and shifted based on what conscious minds believed to be true. This was not magic, it was physics. On the smallest level, particles only became real when they were observed. Before observation, they existed in a state of possibility, able to be many things at once. The act of looking, of being conscious of something, was what made it real. The humans had always known this in their scientific theories, but they had thought it only applied to tiny particles, to the quantum level of existence. They were wrong. The Unity experiments proved that consciousness affected reality on every level. A single mind could not do much. But when minds joined together, when they focused on the same thought with the same intensity, they could change larger things. They could make possibilities into realities. They could make realities into possibilities. The more minds that joined, the stronger the effect became. And when all of humanity joined together, when 8 billion minds focused on a single thought with absolute certainty, they could remake the universe itself. Silas read the classified documents with growing horror. The Unity had been kept secret from the rest of the galaxy. The humans knew that other species would not understand. They would be afraid. They would attack out of fear. So the humans had pretended to be weak. They had pretended to be divided. They had let the galaxy think they were just another young species, struggling with their own conflicts, barely able to reach the stars. But all along they had been preparing, training, learning to unite their minds more quickly, more completely, more powerfully. They had hoped they would never need to use their ability as a weapon. They had sent warnings to every spacefaring civilization, hidden in their radio transmissions, encoded in mathematical patterns. The message was simple. We are not what we seem. Do not attack us. Leave us in peace. The Draconians had received these warnings. Some junior analysts had decoded them years ago, but the High Council had laughed. The warnings had been dismissed as primitive superstition, and so the fleet had been sent, and so the fleet had died. Silas felt sick as she read the reports. The humans had not wanted to destroy the Draconian ships. They had tried everything else first. They had sent more warnings. They had broadcast messages of peace. They had begged the fleet to turn back. But the Draconians had kept coming. They had fired the first shots. They had begun landing troops on the planet's surface. And then, with great sadness, the humans had united. 8 billion minds had joined together in a single moment of perfect consensus. They had looked at the Draconian fleet and they had decided with absolute certainty that it did not exist. And the universe, faced with 8 billion observers who all agreed on the same reality, had no choice but to comply. The ships did not explode. They did not burn. They were simply removed from existence, as if they had never been real in the first place. Every atom, every molecule, every soldier and officer and pilot, gone, erased from the fabric of reality itself. It had taken less than a second. Silas put down the datapad and stared at the wall of her cabin. She understood now. She understood everything. The humans were not warriors. They were not conquerors. They had no interest in empire or domination. They simply wanted to live in peace, to explore the universe, to create and discover and grow. But they had evolved a defense mechanism unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. When threatened, truly threatened, they could remove the threat from existence itself, not destroy it, not defeat it, simply decide that it was not real and make the universe agree. This was why there was no wreckage. The Draconian ships had not been destroyed. They had been unwritten. They had been erased from the story of the universe, and the humans did not even remember doing it. That was perhaps the most disturbing part. The Unity had acted to protect them, but the individual humans had no memory of the event. To them, the attack had simply never happened. Their minds had adjusted to the new reality, the true reality, where no Draconian fleet had ever arrived. Only a few humans knew the truth, the leaders of the Unity, the scientists who had created it. They kept the secret carefully because they understood how dangerous their power could be. Silas realized that she was in terrible danger. If the Unity noticed her, if they decided that she was a threat, she would cease to exist just like the fleet. She would fade from reality, forgotten by everyone who had ever known her. But she had to bring this information home. She had to warn her people. Because if the Draconians attacked again, if they sent more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, the result would be the same. And if the humans felt truly threatened, if they decided that the entire Draconian species was a danger to their existence, Silas did not want to think about what would happen then. She ordered her crew to set course for home. They had been gone for weeks now. The High Council would be impatient. Grand Admiral Vorath would be demanding answers. She had answers, but they were not the answers anyone wanted to hear. As her ship jumped into hyperspace, Silas took one last look at the human data she had collected. She had studied thousands of hours of their history. She had watched their wars, their conflicts, their endless arguments with each other. They were a strange species, so divided, so argumentative, so passionate about their differences. But when they needed to, they could become one. Billions of voices speaking together, billions of minds thinking the same thought. The Draconians had conquered 42 species by being the strongest predators in the galaxy. They had always won because they had the most powerful ships, the best weapons, the most skilled warriors. But they had never faced an enemy like this. They had never faced a species that could simply decide that the Draconian weapons did not exist, that the Draconian ships were never real, that the Draconian soldiers had never been born. This was not a war that could be won with strength. This was not a battle that could be fought with weapons. This was something else entirely, and Silas had no idea what to do about it. The whisper of certainty flew through the darkness between stars, carrying its terrible knowledge home. Behind it, Earth continued to spin through the void, peaceful and beautiful. 8 billion humans lived their lives, laughed with their friends, raised their children, dreamed their dreams. Most of them had no idea what they were capable of. Most of them had never heard of the Unity. But the power was there, waiting, sleeping, ready to wake if it was ever needed again. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Draconian hegemony was about to learn that they were no longer the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They were not even close. The High Council chamber fell completely silent. Silas had finished her report. The 12 ancient Draconians stared at her with expressions of disbelief and horror. Grand Admiral Vorath stood in the shadows, his yellow eyes unreadable. "This is impossible," one council member finally said. "Consciousness cannot affect reality. This is superstition, primitive mysticism." Silas had expected this reaction. She activated her datapad and projected images into the air. The empty space where the fleet should have been, the undamaged Earth, the intercepted documents from human systems. "I brought Captain Draven back with me," she said. "He was the only survivor. He gave testimony about what happened. And then he disappeared. Not died. Disappeared. I watched his body fade away over the course of 3 days until nothing was left." Another council member shook his head. "You must have been deceived. The humans tricked you somehow." "How?" Silas asked simply. "How did they trick 700 warships into vanishing? Where are the bodies? Where is the debris? Our sensors found nothing. Absolutely nothing." The eldest council member raised his claw for silence. "Let us assume for a moment that this report is accurate. What do you suggest we do?" Silas took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been dreading. "We must not attack Earth again. We must not threaten humanity in any way. If we do, they will destroy us. Not defeat us. Not conquer us. Destroy us completely. They will decide that the Draconian species never existed, and we will be erased from history itself." The chamber erupted in outrage. Council members shouted over each other. Some called her a coward. Others accused her of being a human spy. The noise was deafening, but Grand Admiral Vorath raised his hand, and slowly the room fell quiet. "I believe her," he said. Everyone turned to look at him. "I sent that fleet to Earth. I chose the ships and the commanders. I watched them depart, and then I watched them disappear from every sensor, every record, every piece of evidence." His voice was heavy with grief. 3 million soldiers, my finest warriors. They did not die in battle. They simply stopped existing. He walked into the center of the chamber. "I have fought 17 wars. I have never known fear. But when I try to remember the faces of those soldiers, I find that I cannot. When I try to recall their names, I find only emptiness. They are being forgotten, not by choice, but by the universe itself." He looked at the High Council with ancient weary eyes. "The humans have a power we cannot fight. We must make peace." The debate lasted for days. Some council members refused to accept the truth. They demanded more attacks, more ships, overwhelming force. But Vorath and Silas presented their evidence again and again, and slowly the reality began to sink in. The Draconian hegemony had met its match, not in weapons or strategy, but in the fundamental nature of existence itself. Finally, the council made their decision. They would send a message to Earth, not a threat, not a demand, an apology. The message was broadcast on every frequency, in every language the Draconians knew. It was simple and direct. "To the people of Earth, we, the Draconian hegemony, apologize for our unprovoked attack on your world. We acknowledge that this attack was wrong. We seek peace and friendship with your species. We will never threaten you again." The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief. The Draconians had never apologized for anything. They had never backed down from a fight. They had never shown weakness to anyone. But this was not weakness. This was wisdom. This was survival. Humanity's response came 3 days later. They accepted the apology. They offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They extended the hand of friendship to the species that had tried to conquer them. And they sent a single diplomat to meet with the Draconian leadership. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was a small woman with dark hair and kind eyes. She arrived at the neutral station where the meeting was to take place, accompanied by no guards carrying no weapons. She smiled warmly as she entered the conference room. Grand Admiral Vorath towered over her. His scales were dark and scarred from centuries of battle. His claws could have torn her apart in seconds. But when he looked into her eyes, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt seen, truly seen, as if this small, fragile human could look directly into his soul. "Thank you for coming," Vorath said, "and thank you for accepting our apology." Sarah Chen nodded. "We never wanted war. We only wanted to be left alone." "Your message was received," Vorath admitted. "Years ago. We chose to ignore it." "Yes," Sarah said. "You did." There was no accusation in her voice, just sadness. The sadness of someone who had hoped for the best and prepared for the worst. "I must ask," Vorath said. "The fleet, our soldiers, are they truly gone? Is there no way to bring them back?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "When 8 billion minds agree on something, it becomes the truth. Your fleet attacked us. We decided they did not exist, and now they never did." She paused. "I am sorry, I know that does not help, but I want you to understand that we did not do this lightly. We tried everything else first." Vorath nodded slowly. "I know. I have read the records. You warned us many times. We did not want to use the Unity as a weapon," Sarah continued. "We still do not want to. We hope we never have to again. But you will if you must." "Yes, if we must." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sarah leaned forward. "I want to tell you something, Grand Admiral. Something that might help you understand us." Vorath waited. "You think of us as weak because we fight among ourselves, because we argue and disagree and sometimes even hate each other. You see our divisions as flaws. Are they not?" Sarah smiled. "No, they are our greatest strength. We have practiced disagreement for 10,000 years. We know what it feels like to be denied, to be erased from history, to have our existence questioned by others." She held his gaze with quiet intensity. "We would never do to another species what has been done to us throughout our history. But your fleet made their choice. They came to kill us, to enslave our children, to erase our culture, and so we made our choice in return." She reached across the table and took his massive clawed hand in her small, soft fingers. Vorath was too surprised to pull away. "This is the last time we will speak of this," she said. "Your fleet is gone. Nothing can change that. But you can choose a different future. You can choose peace. You can choose to be our friends instead of our enemies." She squeezed his hand gently. "Choose better, Grand Admiral. That is all we ask. Choose better." The meeting ended with handshakes and agreements. Trade routes were established. Cultural exchanges began. The Draconian hegemony and humanity became allies, bound together by mutual respect and a shared understanding of terrible power. Word of what had happened spread through the galaxy. Other species heard the story in whispers and rumors. No one knew exactly what the humans had done or how they had done it, but everyone knew the result. 700 Draconian warships had attacked Earth. There had been no battle, no resistance, no desperate last stand. There had only been silence, no signals, no wreckage. Every ship of the Draconian fleet was destroyed, and the word spread further. Do not attack the humans. Do not threaten the humans. Do not underestimate the small, fragile, short-lived creatures on the blue planet, because when they stand together, when they think as one, the universe itself bends to their will. Some species sent ambassadors to Earth. Others kept their distance, afraid of what they did not understand. But none of them ever considered attacking. None of them ever thought about conquest. The humans continued their lives. They laughed and loved and argued and dreamed. They explored the stars and made friends among the other species. They built and created and discovered. Most of them never knew what they were capable of. Most of them lived their entire lives without ever touching the Unity. But the power was always there, sleeping in the back of 8 billion minds, waiting, ready. And somewhere in the great halls of the Draconian hegemony, Grand Admiral Vorath kept a small piece of metal on his desk. It had been part of Captain Dreven's escape pod, the only physical evidence that the Third Conquest Fleet had ever existed. Sometimes late at night, he would hold it in his claws and remember the lesson he had learned. There are things in the universe that cannot be conquered. There are powers that no weapon can defeat. And sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest army or the strongest ships. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who can simply decide that you do not exist and make the universe agree.